the marriage goes on the rocks. The rocks are there. Right there.
Ever wonder which Hollywood stars were living the high life 24/7? Who in Hollywood partied the hardest? We're exposing 20 stars who were reportedly drunk all the time. Get ready for some jaw-dropping tales. Grab your favorite drink and let's dive in. Number 20, Elizabeth Taylor. Hollywood legend Elizabeth Taylor battled alcohol use disorder for most of her life.
I have always been able to consume enormous amounts of booze and never get drunk.
Liz Taylor was known for her beauty and talent on the silver screen, but she struggled with alcoholism for decades, as well as getting addicted to painkillers. She'd often spend entire days on set too intoxicated to read her lines.
Why don't you put on your nice silk pajamas, honey, and come on down to the party? There's a lovely cool breeze.
Give me my crutch, Maggie.
Taylor eventually entered an addiction treatment center in 1983. Taylor was the first celebrity to admit herself to the Betty Ford Clinic in 1983. Betty Ford, the wife of U.S. President Gerald Ford, had struggled with the same addictions before getting the help she needed in 1978.
A recovering woman alcoholic, and I might say very grateful.
And later opened the Rehabilitation Center to help others.
If I had not found recovery from my own addiction to prescription drugs and to alcohol, I would not have lived to see this day. I would not have lived to see 3 of my children be married. I would not have experienced the joy of being the grandmother of 5 wonderful granddaughters. I know that treatment works, that it saves lives, because it saved mine.
Elizabeth more than likely had no idea the profound effect her willingness to face her addiction had on others suffering in silence. Number 19, Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy is best known for his role of Spock in the original Star Trek series from 1966 to 1969, and in multiple film, television, and video game sequels.
I'd never dreamed that there was going to be any that kind of impact because I'd been on television before and been in movies before, and I was listed in the phone book. It didn't matter to me.
After the original Star Trek series, Nimoy starred in Mission Impossible for 2 seasons, hosting the documentary series In Search of and narrated Civilization 4, as well as making several well-received stage appearances.
How did you persuade him to keep your secret?
He inferred that universe-ending paradoxes would ensue should he break his promise.
You lied.
He also had a recurring role in the science fiction series Fringe. Leonard Nimoy, or should I say Mr. Spock, battled an alcohol addiction while filming the iconic Star Trek. Nimoy later stated that he began drinking to cope with the long days on the Star Trek set. William Shatner stated that Nimoy drank to numb the sheer disappointment of stardom. And 1 drink turned into 2, and before Leonard knew it, his addictive personality kicked in and he couldn't stop. He entered rehab once filming for the show had ended. Nimoy lived until his other habit of smoking took his life at the age of 83. Number 18, Cary Grant. In the 1950s, screen legend Cary Grant decided that his alcoholism was probably a bad thing and sought the help of a psychotherapist. This being the 1950s, the psychotherapist in question introduced him to an experimental but promising young drug called LSD. Grant loved the trips he took on the drug and introduced some of his friends to it. Julie Balaban, the daughter of Paramount president, stated, "I figured if it was good enough for Cary Grant, it was good enough for me." Grant is believed to have taken LSD about 100 times while being treated, but it changed his outlook on life and he lived happily until passing away at the age of 82.
You're Cary Grant.
Not to you, Mom.
Number 17, Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford really loved Pepsi. She was also married to the CEO of PepsiCo, which was awfully convenient. Cola digger. Her husband, Alfred Steele, even awarded her a chair on the company board. Given that she was also a popular actress, Crawford was made the official ambassador for Pepsi, touring the country to promote the beverage, and she took advantage of that position to try and drink all of the world's alcohol. Crawford's contact had a writer that would give Keith Richards pause. On each stop of the tour, She requested to be provided with 2/5 of Smirnoff 100 proof vodka, 1/5 of Old Forester bourbon, 1/5 of Chivas Regal Scotch, 1/5 of Beefeater gin, 2 bottles of Moet and Shandon champagne, and of course a case of Pepsi. Keep in mind that Crawford was often in town for less than 24 hours. Number 16, Dean Martin. The king of cool once stated, "I feel sorry for people who don't drink. When they wake up in the morning, that's as good as they're going to feel all day."
I feel sorry for you people that don't drink. I mean it, because when you wake up in the morning, that's as good as you're going to feel all day.
Much of Martin's performing persona was based on being a lovable drunk, although his daughter and other close friends have claimed that it was all an act and Dino had just apple juice in his glass.
Yeah, when you're sober, life's a pain, so keep drinking.
It was just the drink and cigarette in his hand that made him more revered. Men wanted to be him, and the women wanted to be with him. But he was a kind father, always home for dinner, and only had one cocktail with his wife during the evening. So although Dean Martin's career is alcohol-related, he seemed to have danced with the devil but knew the right time to call it quits. Dean passed away in 1995 at the age of 78.
Everybody loves somebody sometime, and all of my dreams were overdue.
Number 15, Robert Shaw. Big sharks, choppy water, and testy coworkers made the filming of 1975's Jaw an absolute nightmare for most of the people involved.
You know, going into the shark's jaws, it's a very unpleasant thing. The goddamn thing weighs about, I don't know how many tons, several tons, and the jaws absolutely come down on me with the hydraulic pressure, you know.
Robert Shaw sipped on scotch during the long filming days, causing tension between him and his co-star Richard Dreyfuss. Shaw was drunk in most of the film with the exception of one scene, the scene where his character actually gets drunk. Richard Dreyfuss later stated that he liked Shaw when he was sober, but he couldn't stand the man drunk. Once, Dreyfuss actually took a glass of booze out of Shaw's hand and dumped it overboard into the ocean.
The only time I'm ever drunk is on television. I'm never drunk in private life or at work, or we all know that. I mean, they say, listen, if you have to go on the Johnny Carson show, what choice is there to get drunk? That's all I have to say.
Number 14, Michael Landon. Michael Landon, known for his roles on Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie, was the pinnacle of the clean, well-respected man on television. He did it for decades. But he had an addiction to alcohol and Valium that constantly clouded the perfect picture. His co-stars knew that he drank some, but they had no idea just how much he was drinking on set. Landon would spike his coffee with whiskey and other soft drinks with vodka. After filming was completed for the day, they would head out to the bar to continue drinking more. Landon's Little House daughter, Melissa Gilbert, stated that as a kid, she didn't know he sipped vodka from his coffee mug, but, quote, "I'm sure he's one reason why I almost picked men who smelled like alcohol." Along with drinking and painkillers, he smoked 4 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day, which likely influenced the onset of pancreatic cancer that eventually killed him. He was just 54 years old.
30 years ago, my father, Michael Landon, passed away from pancreatic cancer just 3 months after his diagnosis.
Number 13, Veronica Lake. Veronica, who was born Constance Ulkelman in Brooklyn, New York, knew what she was talking about. Although her beauty and mystique made her the biggest film sensation of 1941, fame, motherhood, and 4 marriages failed to make her happy. Alcoholism would become a burden she could never shake. Veronica eventually ran away, hoping to live out the rest of her life in quiet anonymity, but the world had other ideas.
Taken all the joy out of life. I was all through with this kind of stuff. I mean, I knew I'd never have it, but there was no envy in my heart. I'd found a friend who'd swiped a card to take me home.
But being thrust into stardom she never wanted had a bad effect on Veronica. She earned a terrible reputation by squabbling with co-stars and directors. She often showed up late and hungover. It's the kind of behavior that men could get away with, but not petite, beautiful young women, says Mueller. She was supposed to be arm candy. She wasn't supposed to talk back and have a mind of her own. I think not being taken seriously contributed to her problems with alcohol. In her last years, Veronica did some acting in summer stock and starred in a horror film. While visiting Vermont in 1973, she entered the hospital for stomach pains. She died a short time later from acute hepatitis and kidney injury caused by years of heavy drinking. "I wouldn't live it any differently than it was," Veronica said of her life. "How would I learn to be a person otherwise?"
Here.
Thanks. Things a little tough, huh?
Wouldn't be sitting in an owl wagon for local color. They locked me out of my room.
Number 12, William Frawley. By almost all accounts, Frawley's off-screen personality was not that much different from his on-screen one. A notorious misanthrope, where a failed marriage behind him and a fondness for the bottle, he lived in the same bachelor apartment for most of his years in Hollywood. Unable to secure his first choice, Gale Gordon, for the role of Fred Mertz, Desi Arnaz agreed to consider Frawley, who heavily lobbied for the part. Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball had invested everything they had for the pilot and were concerned about Frawley's alcoholism, which was no secret around Hollywood. Arnaz made it clear to him that if he showed up drunk for work more than once, he would not only be fired from the program but blacklisted throughout the entertainment industry. Frawley, despite his lengthy film resume, was virtually unemployable by 1951, thanks to a contribution of his fondness for the bottle and his disagreeable personality. He readily agreed to Arnaz's condition. He never showed up drunk on the set at all, and, in fact, Arnaz became one of his very few close friends. When Frawley died, Arnaz took out a full-page ad in the trade papers consisting of Frawley's picture edged in black and 3 words, "Buenas noches, amigo." When he died in 1966, his gross estate totaled $92,446, and his assets were on track to grow after he died. He had a residual deal for I Love Lucy and My 3 Sons, which was unique to performers of the day. He was able to be paid in perpetuity. His estate and heirs still earn income for rerun revenues. Number 11, Lon Chaney Jr. Lon Chaney Jr. is without a doubt one of the most iconic actors in horror history. Apparently, he also had a raging alcohol problem as well. Tales of Tomorrow was an anthology science fiction series that was performed and broadcasted live on television from 1951 to 1953. The series covered such famous stories as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Black Planet, The Last Man on Earth, and Frankenstein, which starred none other than Mr. Chaney Jr. himself. It was his live television performance as the monster on Tales of Tomorrow that earned him a spot on the Smoking Jacket's 8 legendary drinking binges that only celebrities could have gotten away with. What an honor! In a production of Frankenstein, Lon Chaney Jr. played the monster. An urban legend states that Chaney was intoxicated during the live broadcast due to his heavy drinking. In the broadcast, Chaney is handed a chair, but instead of smashing it, he sets it down and shouts, "Break, break," while making smashing motions with his hands. However, Chaney later explained in an interview that he was not drunk. Before the broadcast, he had spent 4 hours in the makeup chair, having his monster makeup applied. When the performance started, Chaney assumed it was a dress rehearsal and thus did not break the chair when it was handed to him. Between scenes, the director informed Chaney that the broadcast was happening live, so in subsequent scenes, didn't hold back and freely broke pieces of the set.
Look, lady, if you're trying to scare me out of here, you're not getting very far. I'll take the cane.
Please tell me, have you ever seen me before?
Of course.
Number 10, John Wayne. Across more than 170 films and TV productions, actor John Wayne proved himself to be one of cinema's greatest ever stars. His reputation was so good with viewers across the globe that he was recognized by the American Film Institute as one of the greatest male stars of classic American cinema.
Step down off your high horse, mister. You don't get lard less than you boil a hog.
Wayne, nicknamed the Duke, saw his career hit its best year yet in 1970, when he secured an Academy Award win for Best Actor in True Grit. The star's life is still discussed and devoured years after his death in 1979, with loyal fans continuing to enjoy his performances. Outside of the silver screen, though, much about his personal life remains shrouded in mystery, including his supposedly notorious drinking habits.
Quite a speech. Guess I'm feeling my liquor.
In the 2001 book, Cut to the Chase, author Sam Osteen claimed that studio directors knew Wayne had to shoot scenes before noon because after that point he would have a drink. From his research, Osteen alleged that an afternoon tipple often resulted in Wayne becoming a mean drunk. The actor's drinking was discussed by his younger son, Ethan, who recalls Wayne's habit, including when the pair went on his 136-foot yacht. Ethan claimed that the vessel could pull up to an iceberg if close enough to allow Wayne to chip off some ice to place in his drink. In 2018, The Daily Beast reported Ethan as saying he always went for bourbon over generic whiskey. If he wanted a drink, it was bourbon or tequila. An editorial from TV Over Mind appeared to confirm Osteen's research, as, by the afternoon, Wayne was well on his way to being 3 sheets to the wind and meaner than a rattlesnake after it's been stepped on. It added, many people went on record as saying that John Wayne was a particularly mean drunk and didn't sugarcoat the fact for anyone. What people need to remember is that these were different times in which the Duke existed, however, and despite not being seen as right now, back then it was pretty standard to start the day out around noon and keep going until the night was over.
If I can't teach you one way, I'll teach you another. But I'm gonna get the job done.
Did he have a drinking problem? He might not have called it a problem, but he did enjoy his booze. Outside of this, Wayne was also known for his being outspoken on a number of topics about both Hollywood and the wider world.
I'll catch up with you. I don't know when, but I'll catch up. Every time you turn around, expect to see me. There's one time you'll turn around and I'll be there.
Number 9. John Huston. John Huston directed such classics as The African Queen and The Maltese Falcon, but carving his name into cinema history took a distant third to his 2 favorite pursuits, drinking and having sex. According to the many women with direct experience, the only thing longer than Huston's filmography was in his pants. At least on the rare occasion that it was in his pants. Even his daughter, actress Angelica Huston, waxed poetic about it in her memoir. He was extremely well endowed, but I tried not to stare or betray any interest in what I was observing, she wrote, in a passage which would have set alarms off in the CPS cold case department. Whenever Huston wasn't swinging his pendulous junk around in front of his kids, he was making good use of it. He was married 5 times and reportedly cheated on every one of his wives. In addition to carrying on the most poorly concealed extramarital affairs this side of JFK, Huston made his mark on Hollywood by churning out classics, often while so drunk that he would frequently doze off in the director's chair. During the filming of The African Queen in Uganda, Huston's Herculean boozing may have saved his life, as well as the movie. He and leading man Humphrey Bogart decided to abstain from the local water and drink only scotch, thus avoiding the dysentery that laid up Katharine Hepburn and much of the crew. According to Bogart, whenever a fly bit Huston or me, it dropped dead.
I only make films that interest me, and in the hopes that they will interest other people being like me, or my being like others.
Number 8. Julia Bruns. Julia Bruns was born Julia Elizabeth Bruns on March 18, 1895 in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father, who was a caterer and musician, died when she was a child. Julia briefly worked as a cashier at a St. Louis hotel. At the age of 16, she left home and started her career on the stage. Her big break came in 1913 when she was cast in the Broadway play The American Maid. Artist James Montgomery Flagg saw her in the show and asked her to pose for him. She quickly became a successful model and was called the most beautiful girl in America. The talented young actress appeared in several movies, including No Place for Father and At First Sight with Mae Murray. Julia went to London, England in 1915 and starred in play Business Before Pleasure. Then she appeared in Broadway shows The Squab Farm and The Blue Pearl. She traveled to Paris in 1919 where she made the film Quand on Ami. While there, she began partying and experimenting with cocaine. In 1920, she returned to Broadway in the show Beware of Dogs. Julia bought a large house on Sutton Place in New York City and was engaged to a millionaire she called Runny. She never went anywhere without her 2 beloved dogs. Unfortunately, in 1925, she was arrested in Chicago after stealing $4,000 in jewelry. Soon after, her fiancé left her and she was forced to sell her home. She was able to stop using cocaine, but she was now suffering from alcoholism. Julia, who wrote several articles about her addiction, said, "One of the saddest things about drugs is that they enable you to escape from almost everything in life except the thought of death." By 1927, she was bankrupt and living with her boyfriend, James A. Bryle, in a squalid rooming house. Things started looking up when a theatrical agent agreed to finance a play for her. Tragically, on December 24, 1927, she died from alcohol poisoning. She was only 32 years old. Only 5 friends attended her funeral in St. Louis. Julia was cremated and buried in an unmarked grave at Bellefontaine Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri. Number 7. Ava Gardner. She was broke and alone and usually drunk, a one-time Hollywood goddess who had 2 choices. "I either write the book or sell the jewels," she said, "and I'm kind of sentimental about the jewels." And so, in January 1988, Ava Gardner, ravaged by booze and cigarettes and a recent stroke, called British journalist Peter Evans and asked him to ghostwrite her memoirs. What followed were the extended deathbed confessions of a legend, compiled for the first time in Evans's book, Ava Gardner, The Secret Conversations. By the age of 30, she had also married and divorced Artie Shaw and Frank Sinatra, and had had abortions instead of children. The kind of gal who, instead of leaving the men to their drinking, would stay and keep up with them. She also developed a taste for whiskey and a tolerance for men who, when drunk, would beat her. Gardner's strangest relationship was with Howard Hughes, whom she says in her memoirs she never slept with, though he pursued her for 20 years. In 1954's The Barefoot Contessa, she played a girl from the slums of Madrid who becomes a movie star but keeps running off to dance with the gypsies and is murdered when her aristocratic husband finds that she has been sleeping with the chauffeur. The following year, Gardner decided to stop making herself miserable playing good time girls and to have a good time of her own. She had already had an affair with the greatest Spanish bullfighter, Domina Guin, and felt an affinity with Spanish culture, so she went to live in Madrid, cheering on the matadors by day, dancing and carrying on with them at night. Caring by then only about money or a holiday, Gardner took up offers with the same indifference with which she drank or drove fast cars, landing herself in accidents that she was lucky to survive, and inspiring the character of the weary playgirl portrayed by Anita Ekberg in La Dulce Vida. Whether she was drunk or sober, her flamboyant behavior eventually wore out her welcome and she left to spend her last 20 years living quietly in London. Number 6. Gail Russell. One of Republic Pictures' most popular actresses was one of the motion picture industry's most troubled. Her name was Gail Russell. Russell, a beautiful brunette with dark blue eyes, was a gifted talent who dreamed of becoming a commercial artist.
Exciting beauty of Gail Russell, whose first love is shadowed by the specters of the past.
She was born Elizabeth L. Russell in Chicago on September 21, 1924. Throughout her childhood, she was painfully shy and often hid under her parents' piano whenever guests came to their home. In 1946, Russell starred in the first of 4 films she made for Republic Pictures. John Wayne co-produced The Angel and the Bad Man and specifically requested Gail Russell to play opposite him in the Western written and directed by James Edward Grant. She was a success on screen, but her personal life was less so. Russell spent a month in a sanitarium learning to deal with the humiliation and hurt she experienced from a public divorce. Once she was released, she resorted to drinking. On November 26, 1953, Russell was arrested for drunk driving. At her hearing 2 months later, the troubled actress was placed on 2 years probation, with the condition she refrain from intoxicants, stay away from places where liquor was sold, and obtain medical treatment. She was also ordered to pay a $150 fine. On August 26, 1961, less than 4 years after her pledge about setting her life on a new course, Gail was found dead in her apartment. She had lost her battle with alcohol. Her body was discovered by neighbors that had stopped by to check on her. Russell was lying on the floor next to an empty bottle of vodka. There were additional bottles of alcohol strewn about her home. Gail Russell was 36 years old when she passed away. Number 5. John Cassavetes. Actor-director John Cassavetes, director Maudet, the father of American independent cinema and patron saint of Martin Scorsese, is a case in point. Cassavetes died prematurely, aged 59. The cause was long-term cirrhosis brought on by longer-term alcoholism. Hobnailed liver, as career drunks grimly call it. Here again, the creator's death by bottle throws a dark and enigmatic shadow over the films he made.
You kiss her over here on her cheek, on this side. Drama. I know you're tired. You can't be more tired than me. That's true. You can't. Because you're younger and stronger.
And the question, was drink the active ingredient in Cassavetes' genius? Was it for him what opium was for Coleridge, or amphetamines for Jack Kerouac? Would a sober Cassavetes, an artist who wasn't, to paraphrase one of his titles, under the influence, have been a less great or an even greater filmmaker? Did drinking damage his talent or burnish it? Cassavetes' relationship with his industry was famously nonconformist. He was Hollywood's drunken child. He hated the tyranny of screenplay, script, crews, and star system. For others, it was discipline. For him, it was a cage he needed to break out of.
I think if you were in an ordinary movie, someone would say, pick up the dialogue, or let's go here, or this is what you should do. We need a little pizzazz here and all that stuff, and that would be disastrous, I think, for a scene like that. So when it gets out to a movie theater, somebody might say it's dull. Somebody else might say that's the most devastating scene I've ever seen. Somebody else might say What was that all about? You know?
Number 4, Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi was a Hungarian-American actor, best remembered for portraying Count Dracula in the 1931 horror film classic Dracula.
I am Dracula.
Igor in Son of Frankenstein, and his roles in many other horror films from 1931 through 1956. Lugosi developed severe chronic sciatica, ostensibly aggravated by injuries received during his military service.
So I joined Alcoholics Anonymous and I gave it up.
Though at first he was treated with benign pain remedies such as asparagus juice, doctors increased the medication to opiates. The growth of his dependence on opiates, particularly morphine, and after 1947 when it became available in America, methadone, was directly proportional to the dwindling of Lugosi's screen offers. The problem first manifested itself in 1937, when Lugosi was forced to withdraw from a leading role in a serial production, The Secret of Treasure Island, due to constant back pain. Bela Lugosi was, toward the end of his life, a morphine addict and a terrible drunk. During one of their films together, director Ed Wood went to bring him his requested scotch and found him hiding behind a curtain. When Lugosi emerged, there were tears streaming down his face and a gun in his hand, pointed straight at Wood. "Eddie, I'm going to die tonight," he said. "I want to take you with me." Wood, a fellow drunk, realized what it would take to appease the now out-of-his-mind actor, Boilermakers, Lugosi's favorite drink. Lugosi put the gun down and drank himself to sleep.
More Wolfbane, more effective than Wolfbane, Count. Indeed.
Number 3, Bud Abbott. Long acknowledged as one of the best straight men in the business, Bud Abbott was born William Alexander Abbott in Reading, Pennsylvania, to Ray Fisher and Harry Abbott, who had both worked for the Barnum and Bailey Circus. Harry was an advanced man. Abbott dropped out of school as a child and began working at Coney Island. When Abbott was 16, his father, now an employee of the Columbia Burlesque Wheel, installed him in the box office of the Casino Theater in Brooklyn. Eventually, Abbott began putting together touring burlesque shows.
How did they pay you for loafing? You're in a baker's store, you gotta do something.
I'm in a baker, so I'm loafing there.
In 1918, he married Betty Smith, a burlesque dancer and comedienne. Shortly after his marriage, Abbott and his new wife began producing a vaudeville tab show called Broadway Flashes. This show toured on the Gus Sun vaudeville circuit. Around 1924, Abbott started performing in an act with Betty. As his stature grew, Abbott began working with veteran comedians like Harry Stepp and Harry Evanson. During the making of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948, director Charles Barton put up with Costello's antics, which included starting a pie fight with Dracula, putting a leash around the werewolf and walking him around Universal Studios, and pelting ad-libs at Frankenstein's monster, so the creature kept laughing and ruining takes. A bigger concern was Bud Abbott, who would get so sloshed by 2 p.m. that he was incapable of shooting for the rest of the day. Abbott later explained that when he was young, a doctor told him that if he didn't stop drinking, he'd be dead by the age of 30. The straight man was so worried about the diagnosis, he stayed drunk for the next 40 years.
I want to know what's the pitcher's name.
What's on second?
I don't know. Ferris!
You got a catcher?
Yes.
The catcher's name?
Today.
Today. And tomorrow's pitching.
Now you've got it.
Number 2, Gig Young. Gig Young is one of those actors that you saw in countless movies but probably do not remember his name. Young should have been elevated to the ranks of great actors like William Holden and Marlon Brando. He even won an Oscar in 1969, but it did not seem to be enough. Young's lifelong demons got the best of him, and the alcohol and depression he suffered contributed to his sad and shocking death. Gig Young won the Academy Award for his role as Rocky, the dance marathon MC and promoter in the 1969 film They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
Gig, you know, you have done so many movies, and in fact, he won the Oscar, and I bet that was a real thrill, wasn't it?
Oh, it really was. In the first place, I played a part which I suppose you could say went against my type somewhat, so it was a great thrill, and to win it was a great thrill.
Young was married to actress Elizabeth Montgomery from 1956 to 1963, a marriage that strained Elizabeth's relationship with her father, Robert Montgomery, who opposed the union. Young's alcoholism continued to spiral out of control and hastened the end of this already abusive marriage. Young married 5 times and fathered a daughter in 1964, though he denied paternity until a 5-year court case proved otherwise. Remember, no DNA testing back then. Alcoholism plagued his later years, causing him to lose acting roles. He was fired on the first day of shooting the comedy film Blazing Saddles after collapsing on the set due to withdrawals from alcohol. Young was an invisible presence in a terrible movie, The Hindenburg, also released in 1975, and then he hit rock bottom in 1978 when he was cast in a patchwork reworking of an unreleased kung fu movie called Game of Death, incomplete footage of which was shot prior to star Bruce Lee's death in 1973. On October 19, 1978, 3 weeks after his marriage to Schmidt, the couple was found dead at home in their Manhattan apartment. Police theorized that Young first shot his wife and then turned the gun on himself in a murder-suicide. After an investigation, police stated Young had acted on the spur of the moment and his actions were not planned. His motive remains unclear. It was later revealed that Young had been receiving psychiatric treatment from the controversial psychologist Dr. Eugene Landy, who was later professionally decertified for his treatment of Beach Boy Brian Wilson. Young never did get his own movie, but unfortunately he did get his own headlines. Now, instead of being known as a great actor, he is known as a sad, troubled, and confused murderer. Another sad story in Hollywood that should have ended much differently. Number 1. William Holden. William Holden, born as William Franklin Beadle Jr. on April 17, 1918, was an influential figure in the realm of Hollywood cinema.
You wake up the monkey.
Get out! Max!
Next time I'll bring my autograph album along. Or maybe a hunk of cement and ask for your footprint.
Born in O'Fallon, Illinois, he moved with his family to Pasadena, California, where he developed an early interest in acting. His breakthrough came in 1939 when he starred in Golden Boy, a film that set the stage for his future cinematic successes. He attended Pasadena Junior College and the University of Southern California before his acting career took off. Holden's career was marked by a diverse range of roles that showcased his ability to adapt and excel in various genres. In the 1950s, he emerged as one of Hollywood's top leading men, with standout performances in films like Stalag 17, for which he won an Academy Award for Best Actor, and Sunset Boulevard, which earned him a nomination. His other notable works include The Bridge on the River Kwai, Network, and The Wild Bunch. Off-screen, Holden was an ardent conservationist and co-founder at the Mount Kenya Game Ranch in East Africa. He was also a World War II veteran, having served as a second lieutenant in the United States Army Air Forces during the conflict. Despite his successful career and numerous accolades, Holden battled alcoholism throughout his life. His heavy drinking affected his personal and professional life, leading to divorces and a drunk driving incident where he killed another driver. On November 12, 1981, Holden slipped and hit his head on a table while drunk and wasn't found until 4 days after his death.
I'm not brave. I'm scared. For the first time, I'm really scared.
And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this wild ride, smash that like button and subscribe for more juicy Hollywood tales. Check out our other videos for more celebrity gossip and behind-the-scenes stories. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.